You're listening to the Fix My Feet podcast. Solutions for every step in your journey with the nation's leading foot and ankle specialists.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fix My Feet podcast. I'm Dr. David Waters, a board certified foot and ankle surgeon, and I'm joined on our episode today by our two awesome guests, Mike and Sydney George. They are ranchers, I believe ranchers, right, Mike?
Yeah, among many other things. But, ranching seemed to take up most of my time.
Yeah, he's a jack of all trades.
Good. They live out here in central eastern Nebraska, around about us here in Hastings, and glad that they're on here tonight to kind of share their experience with ankle problems and some ankle surgery and some things like that. So without further ado, a little bit about each of you. Mike, a little bit like where you grew up and kind of a little bit more about the ranching so people can kind of understand the perspective you're coming from.
Absolutely. I was born actually here in Hastings, Nebraska, born and raised over in Sutton, which is about 30 miles to the east of here. My dad has been a crop duster my entire life, and just growing up in a small town, pretty much from a very young age, have been involved in every aspect of agriculture in the area. My brother and I actually started our ranching operation back in 2011. And we're first generation ranchers. We started all the way from scratch, started with nothing, and we still have most of it right now.
Awesome. That's awesome.
But yeah, among ranching, we do a little bit of seed sales and agronomy work as well. And that's kind of where we are right now, just kind of in the middle of that.
Good. Sydney?
And our ranch name is Down and Out
That's
Cattle
right.
Company.
Very good.
Oh, yeah.
That's the important part.
Yeah.
Correct. And the history behind that, actually, the brand that goes on our cattle is simply just an arrow down, an arrow to the right. And long story short, through a buddy of ours called me after he had been having a good time one evening, and he just was wondering how things were going on the Down and Out Cattle Company.
Ah, nice.
And that just stuck ever since.
Stuck, huh?
Yep.
Good.
So, I'm Sydney George. I work for Bayer Crop Science as a field testing representative in their digital innovation department. So I kind of have more of a 9-to-5 corporate job, work out of our home. But whenever Michael asks me to fill in and help, whether it's cattle drives or preg checking or, saddling up on a horse, I do that. So, maybe a jack of all trades too. But I was originally born up in Minnesota and raised in North Carolina. So my job had brought me out to Nebraska. And fun fact, Michael and we met in a cornfield at a grower's plot day. And so, I'm not necessarily from Nebraska originally, but here to stay.
Awesome. Well, great. So glad to have you guys on here. We're going to talk about something that's very, very common, although I think the general population doesn't know how common it is, but that is ankle instability or chronic tearing, rupturing of the ligaments around your ankle. And so that is something that Michael is uniquely qualified to speak about today, besides myself. So I'm going to turn the time over to him and just kind of start from the start. Mike, how many times did you injure your ankle? What were those injuries like? If you can kind of give the people listening a little bit of background about maybe what had happened to you so that if they're in the same boat, they would understand that.
Sure. So I tell people I was born with the world's worst ankles for whatever reason, even from a young age as I started in, junior high and high school sports. Just, simple twisting and rolling of my ankles was something I felt like I dealt with very, very often, or maybe more than a lot of my friends and other teammates did. And it, I just sort of felt like it was something I was always going to have to live with. And then back in 2017 at the time, I was attempting to start my illustrious career as a bulldogger or a steer wrestler, and I jumped off my horse onto a steer, and I felt an unusually large pop, and it was worse than any other, twist or sprain or anything that I had ever had in the past. And at the time, being stubborn myself, I didn't really do anything with it. I kind of just powered through it and limped around for several months until it finally sort of, I don't want to say corrected itself, but became bearable. And lo and behold, it was injured a lot worse than what I realized. But it took me about 5 years to really seek any professional help, kind of got better for a while there, or like I said, not necessarily better, but got bearable. And I just sort of got to the point where I was dealing with it and it just kind of accommodating the pain or the instability that I had. But eventually just got to the point where it was pretty obvious things weren't going to fix itself, and it was reverting back to something that was causing me problems on a weekly basis to the tune of a bad sprain or a bad roll, or even something that I would trip and fall all the way to the ground with.
Yeah. So a couple follow-up questions just on that. So you hurt it really bad, steer wrestling, which I would say in generally, if you're going to mess with a steer, you might get some injuries like down the road here. But so you hurt it really bad. But after that, would it roll over on you fairly easily? Or was that kind of the case? Like you said, you'd been struggling with that for maybe most of your life. Is that something you experienced where it would chronically or easily give way and roll on you?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely something that I feel like I was born with a little bit, but after that injury, even as I kind of learned to walk and deal with it, the instability was something that became more and more prevalent. I mean, if I wasn't paying attention and walking really, really carefully, even just walking across the driveway, the smallest stone or unevenness on the ground of things like that, I'd roll my ankle on a very regular basis. I would say 2 or 3 times a week. And it was just getting to the point where it was causing problems on my day-to-day activities in life.
Just for you, Sydney, did you ever notice any of the symptoms or any of the things that he might have been dealing with or ways he might have been compensating for this instability that he had?
Absolutely. Not to be blatant, but he just kind of walked on that foot and that leg differently. But you could tell that he had been doing it for a long time. So it wasn't like he was limping or anything like that. It was just he kind of turned his foot a little differently, as well as I saw him, roll it or kind of fall a little bit, stumble. And, being a newlywed wife, I was like, you need to get help. You need to fix that because it's just going to keep getting worse. And the work that you do, you're going to be laid up for a lot longer, do even more damage and not be able to do all the things that you love to do and be able to work. So if you continue down this path.
Good. So rolls all the time. What would you say, like, this is something I always ask my patients when I bring them on, like, what were some of the impacts you noticed to your day-to-day life, Michael? Like, what are things maybe you had to change or things that were done differently or things maybe you felt like I can't even do that because of the instability I have?
Oh, yeah. It was really, I was just finding myself having to actively compensate the way I was moving about, not only in my crop scouting business, but on the ranch when I was fixing fence, just doing every day-to-day tasks. Things were taking me longer. I was really having to pay close attention to how I was just moving about and walking. And then on top of that, every time I would roll my ankle or it would get worse and worse. And, I would recover reasonably fast, but I'd roll my ankle, then I'd spend a day or two limping around, really walking gingerly, and it just wouldn't really allow me to move about my day, not necessarily being able to accomplish certain tasks without considering, how quickly I could move or how easily I could move or run away from mad cows or whatever it might be. It just really put a permanent hitch in my get along is what I would say.
Yeah. So did you guys try anything? Patients often try putting a brace on it, different types of shoes. Did you go down that path at all on your own where you tried some things to try and help you feel more confident with it?
Not probably as much as I should have. I just my stubbornness over the years and just power through it was the way that I kind of dealt with it, I guess I would say. Pain medication on times, okay. From time to time on the worst days was probably the main thing that I did. But outside of that, just kind of modifying the way that I would walk and sort of orient my foot and ankle just to accommodate for the pain and the discomfort and the instability I was feeling is really what I did for the most part.
I think at one point you did kind of wear like hunter boots that laced up higher just to try to utilize that for stability. But of course, that's not going to ultimately help it. And even going back to things that he changed, I mean, he used to run and work out on a consistent basis. And I like to run and am training for a half marathon currently and would just say, hey, you want to go for a run with me? And he was just like, no, I'm like, not going to be able to do that. So not even knowing what was actually wrong, he was just like, there's no way that I would be able to, one, keep up with you, not be, just because I can't keep up with you, but also just because I'm in pain or, just can't.
Yeah.
No, thanks to Dr. Waters, I don't have that excuse anymore.
We'll find another excuse.
Forced to work out.
Oh, so that's good. So you kind of get to this point. You've twisted it a bunch of times. Oh, one question I had that I know people listening will think about the pain. How would you describe the pain? Like on those worst days that you talked about where you might take, I don't know, ibuprofen or whatever you were taking for pain. How would you describe that if patients are wondering now, what's this pain like in my ankle?
Right.
What would be your description for that?
I would say on the days that I would really twist it or roll it, it was like a real brief instant of maybe this sounds a little bit too extreme, but like a 12 on a scale of 10. And then the next 2 to 3 days after that were probably consistently in the 7 or 8 range, just really constant pain that wouldn't really go away for a few days. And then after I walked around and kind of modified the way I was moving, it would finally subside again. And I could kind of get to somewhat back to normal, or what I thought was normal, I guess I would say. But real brief instances of sharp pain that would really about take me down. But then a few days of 7 or 8 consistently.
Yeah. So you get to this point. I always ask patients, what was the tipping point? When do you decide to come see somebody like myself or another foot and ankle guy, or even a primary care doctor for that matter? I know you're a tough rancher out there and you steer wrestle cattle, which I would never do that in my whole life. So
put on a good show anyway.
Where is the tipping point at where you decided like, this is not something that's going to get better, that I might need to get looked at?
Well, the beginning of the tipping point was when we got married. I finally had somebody chirping in my ear all the time, telling me I needed to get it taken care of because she could see how it was affecting me on a day-to-day basis. So that kind of got my thoughts in my head thinking about going in and getting it looked at. But then I can remember one day in particular, I had come home from fixing fence all afternoon, and we were in a hurry to go somewhere, and I was just frantically trying to unload all of our gear and equipment and everything we had that day. And I had jumped off the 4-wheeler trailer to unload some stuff, and I twisted it worse than I had for quite some time. And I was literally laying on the driveway on the ground because I was in so much pain. And I finally just told myself, all right, this is nonsense. I need to go. This is obviously not getting better. I need to have this looked at. It was just a much more severe twist or roll or whatever you want to call it that I had experienced for quite some time. And like, this is enough. I better go take care of this.
How about you, Sydney? What was your indication to encourage him maybe to come see him? I mean, a lot of these ranchers, it's because the wife sends them to see me, to be completely honest. So yeah. What was your point? Like, we need to get this looked at. This is not just run of the mill, a little bit of pain here.
The fact that when he came in from that, I didn't see it happen, but when he came inside, he kind of was wincing or walking funny. And I just asked, what happened? What's going on? And he was like, man, I just fell to the ground. And same thing. This is nonsense. You need to go in and see somebody. Maybe it won't be as bad as you think, but at least you'll have an answer and steps to just fix it instead of just living with the unknown and just dealing with it. He actually went into just his primary care doctor in Sutton and then got a referral from there, but I can let him tell you more about that.
Maybe just for others who might be what were some of your apprehensions about coming in and seeing somebody and talking to somebody about them, Mike?
Without a doubt, the biggest thing that was holding me back is the thought of the downtime. I was afraid that it was going to be as bad as it kind of turned out to be. And with everything that I've got going on, I knew the question was going to come up, well, when's a good time to fix this or take care of it? My answer was going to be, I don't really have a great time to do it. So just putting it off simply because of the busyness of work schedules and just life in general was my biggest apprehension towards getting it looked at. And then on the backside of that, my second biggest thing was I just throughout my whole life, I've never really sought help on things like that. I've just kind of always been let's just power through it type of a person. Stubborn, you could probably say. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not necessarily scared to go to the doctor, but I am a little scared of needles. So I knew if it was going to get really bad, needles were going to get involved at some point too. Yeah. So between missing some work and not having a lot of free time and then knowing what could maybe happen was pretty much the sum of it.
Yeah.
We deal with, I don't want to say like gross stuff, but we deal with, having sick calves or we're calving right now and we're having babies, left and right with our cows. And, we can give vaccines and stuff to our cows, but he doesn't like getting his blood drawn or shots or anything like that, which is pretty funny.
That's awesome. So it gets bad enough. We get to this tipping point, like Sydney said, and I remember you had seen your primary care, and then I think they either referred you over to us, or I don't know, you may have chosen us, based on their recommendations. But your initial thoughts about the initial workup and evaluation that you went under there?
Yeah, we saw my primary care clinic in Sutton. They gave me the referral, and truthfully, from the first time I came in here, I felt very comfortable with everything that was. I didn't like the diagnosis. I didn't like that we were going to have to go down this road, obviously, because I was hoping for, just maybe get something a little bit less invasive have to be done. But that being said, once I kind of accepted the road we were going to have to go down from day one coming in here, I felt extremely comfortable with what we were going to have to do and the kind of the timeline of what was going to happen. It was as good as it could have been, considering the amount of damage that was ultimately going on inside of my ankle.
I think it's good for people to hear it from you rather than me. Best you can explain what were the things I told you that were wrong with the ankle that we would probably need surgery to address those things.
So there was some tendon or ligament damage, especially on the outside. I'm not going to be able to give you the right terminology probably here, but there was a tendon on the outside of my ankle that essentially went down and attached to the outside of my ankle, where there was a chunk of bone that had broken off that was more or less just dangling on the inside of there. And then on the inside of the ankle was some damage as well that you had to go in and fix both sides of it. So it sounded a little bit scary. And truthfully, the damage was a lot worse than I expected it to be, considering I had kind of been putting up with it for so long. But yeah, I was reassured right away that it was fixable. And that was probably the most surprising thing to me, because once I kind of went down the list of everything that was wrong in there, it was like, oh gosh, can this even be taken care of? And I really not, from you and your staff, I never really got any hesitation. They're like, oh no, this is something we can take care of, and reassured me it was best I finally came in to do so.
So Sydney, from your thought, I know we got some more testing initially and kind of got a better idea of, maybe what everything was going on. I think Michael, you said it perfectly, what was going on. There was ligament damage. There was a small fracture where the ligament had attached that was no longer attached, and some other things. So we start talking about surgery. Your thoughts, Sydney, about your initial thoughts about surgery, and then we'll hand it back to Michael, his initial thoughts, because a lot of patients I deal with, as soon as I say that word, like lights out, brains off, we're not going to comprehend anything the rest of the time we're talking right now. So your initial thoughts about that?
I've had very minor knee surgery before. So to me, I don't know, surgery isn't necessarily scary. I also came from a science background, so I'm like, I'm almost fascinated, right? But, to have it be Mike and my husband, I was just worried a little bit of how intense it was going to be. And anytime you go under anesthesia, that can be kind of scary. And just once again, kind of that recovery time. And selfishly enough, like what was I going to have to pick up from a workload standpoint to cover him? So it was a little scary or worrisome, but you guys just were awesome from first, meeting and first appointment right away. And just the amount of information and how the staff, everybody here handled it, greeted us and explained everything was just awesome. So.
Your thoughts, Mike, when you heard that we were probably going to need some surgery to take care of this?
Well, immediately I got scared of needles right away, because I knew that was going to be part of that whole deal. But as soon as I got over that, I guess I had never had major surgery before. I had broken my nose once, and they technically called it surgery to fix that. But, it's not like they really had to do any incisions. They just sort of went up there and rooted around and fixed it, I guess. But it was a little scary because I had never done anything like that. But in talking to you and the staff and everybody else, just everybody seemed so confident and so reassuring that this was something that could be fixed easily. It went from being scared pretty quickly to being excited that hopefully once the recovery process was done, this was something I would kind of get past and maybe be able to just to carry on a normal normal life.
Yeah, I mean, we deal with this stuff all the time. Like I said, it's very, very common. We do multiple repairs of ligaments every single month. And so Mike had a few other, he wanted to make things a little challenging.
Yeah.
So a little broken bone and some other things, but nothing we hadn't dealt with before. So yeah, we were able to get in there and get that taken care of for him. So what was recovery like for both of you, that first initial and then the next few weeks after that, your thoughts about recovery and what that you kind of went through there?
I would say recovery went overall more quickly than I thought it was going to. It was difficult for sure because I'm definitely up early in the morning on my feet, making things happen, really busy type of guy all day. So the fact that I had to force myself to be on the couch for a couple weeks non-weight bearing, that part was difficult, but I was, considering the amount of damage that we found inside my ankle, I was really happy it was only 2 weeks of non-weight bearing. I was truthfully kind of thinking it was going to be a little bit longer than that. I would say the first few days were the most difficult. Actually, day one coming home from the hospital, that wasn't bad at all. But the next few days were probably the worst. Just, the swelling is bad. It felt like it was bad. My foot was so bandaged up, I really couldn't see it. But it felt like if I didn't keep my foot elevated, it very quickly felt like it there was a lot of fluid in there. My foot felt 10 times heavier than it would on a normal day. And that was probably the worst of the recovery, is just the fact that if I didn't keep it elevated, I could definitely feel what felt like fluid collecting down in there. But if I did what I was told to do, everything went pretty good, So, and then, after the 2 weeks of non-weight bearing, got the walking boot put on. And that truthfully felt kind of like a learning process, really, because I was surprised how difficult it was just to walk even with that boot for a couple days. But that being said, that was a couple days of some pretty difficult sort of, I don't want to say relearning to walk. I mean, people have done a lot more intense rehab than what I had to do, but it sort of felt like I was relearning how to trust my foot, I guess is what I would say. But a couple days of some ramped up learning curve there, and then it just really took off pretty quickly.
From your perspective, Sydney, what was recovery like for maybe somebody that's in that caregiver role?
Keeping him off of that foot and sitting on the couch. It was almost like a little kid where they just, we don't have kids yet, but kind of that just like nagging, like, do I have to? Like, and stuff kind of constantly. And you guys had an awesome care package that went through when to take medication at what time and how long to elevate and ice, and we just stuck to that plan. I was very diligent about that plan because it does get explained to you that if you get behind, then you can have more intense pain and maybe have some complications. So it's like, just do everything, follow the rules and instructions so you don't have to necessarily go through this again. And that's how I kind of explained it to Mike. It's like, if you start walking on that foot, you're just going to be back in the hospital again. And even though you guys are great, it'd be nice to stay out of here and out of surgery. But he stayed off of it for the 2 weeks. And then I kind of drove him around from time to time and at least go see the cows and water and stuff like that, just to kind of get him out a little bit. We used crutches for that. And then when he was in the boot, he was definitely trying to get after it, maybe a little too quickly. But it was crazy. The muscle, just his leg muscle from being off of it for 2 weeks. Like, I don't want to say atrophied because I don't know all the technical terms, but
that's the right
it was
term.
Like jello, his leg, because he just wasn't using it at all. Yeah. So definitely when he talked about, having to trust his foot again and stuff, I mean, that was probably part of the process, was that, that muscle and everything.
Yeah, definitely. There's atrophy and it comes quickly, without you. So it definitely sets in. So we got you in the boot. Did you go to therapy? I think we sent you to a little bit of physical therapy, right?
I did. I believe I did either 6 or 8 rounds of physical therapy there in Sutton. And I'll be perfectly honest, I wasn't a real big believer in that before this whole deal. But once again, between the doctors and you and my wife, everybody pretty well said that this is something you're not going to want to skip. So I did exactly what I was told to do there. And that was actually really pretty crazy too. I went twice a week for, I believe, 4 weeks. And even, the small 2 to 3 day gap in between sessions, it was pretty incredible how much progress I made. Even, every single week or every single session that I had, it made a huge difference. I truly believe that. And my leg went from being all atrophied and kind of jello-y and saggy. And that really, I think that really made a big difference of how quickly it kind of built back. And right now you couldn't hardly tell the difference, like anything ever happened. And we're only a few weeks out from when I was done with physical therapy. So yeah, I went from kind of a non-believer to realizing how important that really was.
And I mean, it was all just about kind of gaining back that mobility, you know, just very small turns with his foot with a band, just up, down, side to side. Mike, I don't know if there was anything else that they kind of had you do, but just those things that you need to be able to do with your foot to twist and turn and just walk. I mean, if you walk down the stairs, you know, your foot kind of turns, or, you know, you got to shuffle around something, you know, your foot has to turn and move in a lot of directions. And so to have that mobility back is awesome.
No, therapy is critical for me, like as a surgeon on the back end, like getting people back, getting range of motion back, getting strength back, getting flexibility back is critical for long-term outcomes and good results. So so went to therapy. So now, how long has it been since we did the surgery now, Mike?
We did that surgery in the middle of December, and we're at the end of March now. So what is that, about
4 months? And where would you say you're at now? What's your function like? What's your pain like? Swelling, things. That's things people wonder at 3 or 4 months. What could they expect after something like this?
I would say if a 10 is fully functioning, 100% normal, I'm probably at about a 7 or 8 right now. When I wake up in the morning, everything feels good. There's really no pain at all. Very little swelling ever anymore at this point in time. By the end of the day, it's a little tired. It's a little bit sore, but not bad. But that really probably has to do a lot with just the nature of my work. You know, I'm on my feet all day long, definitely putting in long days and moving around a lot. Maybe, you know, some people are in my same boat. Some people maybe have jobs where it's not quite as demanding, you know, but considering everything I put it through, I'm very happy with where I'm at this point. Like I said, very, very little swelling, a little bit of soreness by the end of the day. But that's really about it. No real pain to speak of, I guess I would say.
He's not exactly running with me again, but that might be caused from other excuses.
Not yet.
Yeah, I will say if somebody is a huge workout fanatic or a runner or something like that, you know, 3 to 4 months, you might not quite be back to where you were before, but I would say I don't think more than another month or two, and I think I'll be able to do everything I ever did prior to the surgery.
So a lot of people's apprehension around this stuff revolves around time off of work or time away from work or away from activities. And you have a very physically demanding job than a lot of people I deal with. What was your return to work like? How did you phase that in? When were you back to a full load, half load, those kinds of things?
You know, I was basically back to a full load as soon as I felt confident enough to do it. Really, that I would say confidence in trusting my foot and ankle's ability just to do the things that it now can do again was kind of almost more of a mental thing than a physical thing, I would say, because I spent so long being real tentative about the motions I was making and how I would plant my foot down as I was walking or running or doing whatever. And just learning to trust that was the biggest thing. Basically, as soon as I was back to work, it was as much as I would let myself do. I mean, it didn't take long at all before I was basically doing everything I was before. And, you know, right off the bat, it was a little bit more sore, I guess, and painful, but that has continued to go away pretty rapidly.
He probably jumped into it maybe a little too quickly. You know, being in that boot, he kind of was trusting that, right? Yeah. And just was kind of getting back into things. And then once he kind of got the green light from PT to not be in that boot as much and that he could be out of it and then, you know, continue with the exercises. Yeah, he just went straight for it, full load probably. Probably suggests, you know, a little bit more of a gradual, you know, back into things, but can't stop him.
I think one thing it does suggest, you know, like for those who might be listening, if you have a sit down job, you'll be back to work pretty quick. You know, like you could be back in an office space, I always say within a few days to a week or so, depending on how your pain control goes. But even for a highly demanding job, you can be back on the job with some restrictions, depending on the work environment, within a few weeks for sure, once you get that boot and get going again. So
yeah, I think it really depends on your pain tolerance. Right. And if you have a sit down office type job or whatever, you could go back to work almost immediately, especially if you had, to me, the biggest thing was the opportunity or somewhere to elevate your foot, that was probably the biggest thing that I felt helped. Like Sydney said, I didn't really have much of a gradual go back to work, but what I found is even if I could take a quick 10, 15 minutes over lunch or something just to elevate and let a little bit of swelling go down, that was the biggest thing for me. Even with a more demanding job, if you can just find little breaks or time frames to elevate and stay on top of your pain meds if you're on them, that's probably the biggest thing. And truthfully, I got to the point where the tail end of my pain medication, I really didn't even take it because I didn't really feel like I needed it. I just needed to elevate, and that was about it.
So just as we wrap up, if you compare what you think of your ankle now compared to what it was like before we did any surgery.
Well, I can tell you right now that since, and part of this probably is because I'm still I would say slightly in the recovery process, but I haven't rolled that ankle since this happened. Maybe I haven't pushed it quite like I have in the past, just because I still am slightly recovering, but I haven't had any issues with the rolling and twisting like I was having at least weekly before that. I mean, the stability is much, much better without a doubt, and it feels like it's getting stronger all the time. My other ankle, I've rolled it several times, so
you'll be seeing him soon.
Yeah. But the one that's got that we operated on, or you operated on and got fixed, the stability of it is incredible compared to what it used to be, because it was just like a limp noodle before that. It was amazing I could even walk at all.
He's definitely not turning that foot out as he did prior to surgery. A little bit of that is just because the boot kind of, restricts how you can walk in it. So I think some of it was kind of learned habit from that, and just from how he was compensating for it before. So it's kind of like a mental game, making sure that he puts his foot straight because he was so used to walking a certain way. So making that conscientious decision to walk normally or just straight, have his foot a little bit more straight. I think he's still working on that. I catch him from time to time and I'm like, walk with your foot straight. But it's so much better. And I mean, he's not coming into the house wincing because he fell or rolled it.
Well, and before it didn't really seem like an option for me to walk with my right foot straight with a normal gait. I had to cock it off to the side for the most part to even have a chance to not fall down, more or less. And now, even though sometimes I find myself having to force myself to walk like a normal human being, at least I have that option. Whereas before I couldn't get around like it that way.
Good. So this is always $1 million question. If you had to do it again, would you do it again?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I would do it a lot sooner. I'll say that.
Yay.
Well, good. Well, as we wrap this up, final thought, there's lots of people walking around right now who have chronic ankle instabilities. I mean, you see all these basketball kids when I was growing up, I turned my ankle, I can't remember how many times. And it's a very, very common problem. So one, people shouldn't think that this is super uncommon. It's very common. We deal with it all the time. And two, the other thing I want patients to take away is that it's very fixable. We fix it all the time. The surgery for it's very, very good. It's been time honored. It's been done for over probably 50 years now. There's lots of good data behind it. And patients do very, very well. I think Mike demonstrates that with recovery and return to activity and eventually return to full activities, even in high-level athletes or very demanding professions, people return to full activity. And so that's usually my expectation for patients when we go down this road. So any final thoughts from you guys before we wrap things up?
I would just tell anyone who's listening who has similar symptoms, whether it's been an injury or just something that they've kind of been dealing with for most of their life, I would say don't do what I do and put it off. I mean, I know that everybody's set of circumstances is a little different, and maybe they've got reasons that I can't really necessarily even think of why they're putting off. But I guess I would say if they have access to Platte River or anybody for that matter to take care of this, you're going to be better off doing it sooner than later. That's just one thing I can tell you right now. I wish I would have done it a lot sooner. And they say a good set of feet, they'll take you places. So you got to take care of that.
That's true.
And you'll be down for a little bit, but if you follow protocol and do what you're told in the recovery process, it won't be that bad. And even in whether you're an athlete or a high demanding occupation, at the end of the day, you're going to be able to perform much better not having to worry about that than you do right now.
I just want to say thank you guys and thanks Dr. Waters and the team here and everybody. I mean, the process was pretty seamless from start to finish, just with appointments. And I mean, even surgery went by really quick and went really awesome. And just everybody has been so great and so kind to us. And I mean, even just having us on here, we appreciate it, and sharing our story and just giving us a platform to do that is great. So keep doing what you're doing and keep helping people.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. So before I wrap up, check these guys out. You guys are on Instagram, right?
Yep. Our
Yes.
Instagram name is the Georges 2011, and our little symbol or logo right now is the Down and Out Cattle Company.
Good. Check these guys out. If you want to check us out, we're at Platte River Foot and Ankle on Instagram, Platte River Foot and Ankle Surgeons on Facebook and TikTok. And certainly you can check out podcast specific Facebook site, Fix My Feet Podcast. Thanks so much to Mike and Sydney for being here today, and everybody have a wonderful week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Fix My Feet podcast. To schedule an appointment with one of our providers, visit www.prfootsandankle.com.